I'm Jennifer Greenburg, and I'm the author of At War with Women, a book that looks at how post-9/11 politics of gender and international development transformed U.S. military power. My interest in this topic stretches to before I started my PhD, when I was working in the international development sector. And I was really struck by how development organizations, even very small-scale organizations doing things like supporting women's agriculture in West Africa, were under pressure, if they were receiving funding from the US federal government, to represent what they were doing as combating terrorism. So I started doing research on US military bases in trainings where at this time, the U.S. Agency for International Development was actually hiring for-profit private development contractors to teach military audiences how to use development best practices as a counterinsurgency weapon. In the time I spent on military bases, I also interacted with women, soldiers and Marines in the U.S. military, who had been deployed on these all-female counterinsurgency teams that were attached to all-male special forces units. And this was really surprising because at the time, women were technically banned from direct assignment to ground combat units. So the book resulting from this research makes an overarching critique of what I call a new imperial feminism, or a particular way of understanding the women I write about, these soldiers and Marines, as these feminist trailblazers for women's right to serve alongside men in combat units, at the same time as they understood themselves as modeling a modern, liberated, Western version of womanhood in the interactions they had with Afghan women. So as an alternative to this more popular narrative of gender in the Afghanistan war, At War with Women provides an analysis of how this imperial feminism was actually really crucial to a crisis of US hegemony in the post-9/11 period, or the way that US power operated in the world. To understand how this new imperial feminism was assembled, I argue we have to look at three interconnected processes. First, the way that development was conscripted as a counterinsurgency weapon in the post-9/11 wars. Second, the way military instructors actively drew on colonial and Cold War histories to make soldiers in that counterinsurgent image. And third, the way that women's labor was incorporated into those ranks in new gendered forms. So this relationship between development, colonial historiography, and gender is what structures the different chapters of this book. My hope is that the post-9/11 wars will be taught more in university classrooms and everywhere else, and that this book can be a part of that discussion. There's a real temptation to see the post-9/11 wars as over, following this catastrophic withdrawal of the United States from Afghanistan in August of 2021. But empirically, that's just wrong. If we look at the expansion of the war on terror in Africa, drone war, the number of counterterrorism operations that have happened all over the world over the last several years, a better question then becomes, how do we understand how the geography of the post-9/11 wars has expanded? What will the third decade of the post-9/11 wars look like?